Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. A couple weeks ago we took a look at the Taurus 856, a 6-shot 38 special revolver that's a solid choice for people looking for self-defense on a tight budget. Today we're going to take a look at the 856's 9mm semi-automatic brother, the G3. Real quick before we get going though, I just wanted to say that this video is going to be a little more in-depth than my usual video because I think there's a lot of people that are actually looking for information on the G3. Also, if you're looking for information on that 856, I will drop a link in the description to that video as well. The vast majority of handguns sold today are of the striker-fired variety. These guns are rugged, dependable, and they offer a generous capacity for their size. However, the usual suspects of the striker-fire category, your Glocks, your Smith & Wessons, these are sometimes out of reach for people that are on a very tight budget, and that's where the G3 comes in. This thing offers striker-fire performance at a very reasonable price. Speaking of affordability, the G3's MSRP is $340, but as usual can be found on the street for less than that. I got this for $250 at Brownells. There's also a optics-ready version called the G3 Toro, and the MSRP on that one is $450. Alright, let's get this unboxed. The G3 comes in the standard Taurus box. It's white and orange. It tells you to always bring it. When you open it up, got some lifetime warranty stuff, some coupons, got your owner's manual, which you should read. Got the trigger lock that no one uses. And we have the G3 itself. Got the G3 here. It's got a magazine here, and you should double check because in my box, there's actually another magazine down in here. So yeah, this version comes with two mags. This one is a 17 round mag and this one is a 15 round mag. So now that we've got it unboxed, let's dive in. The G3 is the successor to the popular and successful G2C, and as such, it's an evolution or refinement of the design. While the G2C is a compact handgun in terms of size, very similar to a Smith & Wesson Shield, the G3 is noticeably larger and much closer in size to a Glock 17. It's 7.28 inches long, 5.2 inches tall, and it is 1.2 inches wide. It has a 4-inch barrel with a 1 in 10 twist, and it weighs about 25 ounces unloaded, according to Taurus. The G3 has a polymer frame, a stainless steel barrel, and a steel slide. The slide is finished in a matte black Tenifer finish that looks very similar to what we saw in the 856 revolver. The sights that are mounted on the gun are a blacked out rear sight with a white dot front post sight, which I collect. The frame of the G3 sports a good sized 1913 pick rail for mounting accessories, and also these small relief sections on both sides of the frame for your thumbs. The slide stop and external safety are only on the left side of the frame, so they're not ambidextrous and not able to be switched to the other side, which is something that left-handed shooters might want to consider. The mag release is also on the left side of the frame, and this, however, is reversible and can be switched to the right side for the lefties out there. Also on the frame, we can see the polymer trigger shoe and the safety blade in the middle, as well as the generous texturing that Taurus throws in all the way around the frame. Disassembly of the G3 is very similar to a Glock. So first we're going to make sure that we're clear. So now we are going to pull back ever so slightly on the slide and pull down on the takedown tabs that are on either side of the frame. Point in a safe direction, pull the trigger, and the slide comes right off. Now inside the frame, we see a trigger and sear system that is very reminiscent of the M&P system, where the striker is held at the fully cocked position by the sear, which is back here. There is one noticeable difference to the trigger action though, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, inside the slide also looks very similar to a Glock for those of you that are familiar with that. We've got a dual captive recoil spring that rides on a polymer guide rod. And we have a tilting barrel that again looks very similar to a Glock design. We've got the striker channel back here, and we've got the striker block safety as well as a hooked cartridge extractor. Now to reassemble the slide, we're going to take the barrel and drop it back in. And then we're going to take the recoil system and drop that back in, making sure that the smaller spring section is closer to the chamber area, and this flat part goes towards the front. We're also going to make sure that the recoil spring engages the lug on the back of the barrel there. Now we're going to take the slide and drop it back on the frame, pull back, test for function, and we're good to go. I mentioned a second ago that there was one aspect to the trigger that sets it apart, and I wanted to look into that now. The G3 actually has a second strike capability, which means that if the shooter pulls the trigger and the round in the chamber fails to ignite, the shooter can pull the trigger again to manually cock and release the striker on that same round without having to cycle the slide. So let's take a look at that. First, we're going to make sure that we're clear. Okay, so we're going to pull the trigger like normal, and let's pretend that the round did not go off. So without cycling the slide, I'm going to pull the trigger again, and as you can see, it's a much longer travel, but it still drops that striker. One more time. Again, the pull distance for that is longer, and the weight of the trigger pull is actually heavier, but it's actually a really nice feature to have. Speaking of trigger pull weight, let's take a second and test the pull weight of the G3 really quick. So we're going to start out with the striker in normal position, which is cocked. I have my handy dandy trigger pull gauge here. We're going to put that on the bow of the trigger, pull back, and that was just a little bit over 5.5 pounds. Do it again. This one is just shy of 5.5 pounds. And one more time. So now we're going to test the pull weight in the second strike or double action mode. That one's right at 6 pounds basically. Maybe just a hair above 6 pounds. And one last time. That one's at about 6.5 pounds, maybe a little above that because I placed it a little bit higher on the trigger shoe. Really quick before we move on, I wanted to talk about the magazines that are included with the G3. Again, there's a 17 round extended and a 15 round flush fit. The thing that I would like to note here is that the 15 round, if you can see that, is actually made by Metgar and it's stamped as so on the front of the magazine, but the 17 round is not. It just says caliber 9mm, actually says made in Brazil instead of made in Italy. And you can also tell on the back of the mag, the extended one has the seam running down the middle that the Metgar one does not. So if you care about that both of the magazines are Metgar, just know that the flush fit is, but the extended one is not. The 17 round does have this little sleeve on here to make sure it looks nice when it's in the gun. Throw it in. It does give you a little bit more length on the grip there. Now that we've taken a look at the specs and features of the G3, I wanted to talk a bit about what I liked about it, and there are actually a number of those things. So from front to back, for some sense of order, the first thing I liked was that the included sights are metal and that they're Glock compatible. That's kind of a big deal for me because that gives up people options for replacing them. I like the style of the sights themselves. They're a blacked out rear and a simple white dot front, which is my preferred sight arrangement. I like the second strike capability like we talked about, and I also like the relatively lightweight trigger pull in normal mode. That was kind of surprising for me that it was that light. I also like the really short trigger reset, which I can probably demonstrate to you right now. I pop that out. So we'll pull the trigger, cycle slide, and resets right there. Pretty short. I like the aggressiveness of the texturing on the frame, which reminds me a lot of my M&P. I'm really big on an aggressive frame texture. Lastly, I really like the short length of pull, which is the distance from the back of the frame to the trigger shoe. This distance is notably shorter than a lot of guns I own, and as a shooter with smaller hands, this makes this very comfortable for me to shoot. Now for some things that I don't like as much. First off is the external safety. I understand why some people would be looking for this feature. Personally, I don't prefer it, and I wish there was at least an option to get the G3 without the external safety. It does actuate nice and positively, very tactile. You can hear it on and off, and it gives me a good place to ride the safety with my thumb when I'm shooting, so that's something at least. The second thing I don't like is the very long pre-travel for the trigger. I understand that it's a necessary evil for that second strike capability, but I would still like it if Taurus was able to reduce that to a shorter pre-travel somehow. Finally, and this is the most minor of complaints, I do not like the finish on the slide. It just screams cost cutting, and it's great at attracting any sort of dust and lint in the vicinity, and it kind of makes it a pain to clean. So that's it, the PT review of the Taurus G3. Next up for this guy is a whole bunch of testing with a whole bunch more rounds. We've only got about 200 rounds through it at this point, so I wanted to put a bunch more down the pipe before I gave you my final thoughts on it. I'm going to be putting everything I have through it, from premium self-defense rounds to like the dirtiest, nastiest steel-cased ammo I can find. It is worth it to note, though, that in the 200 rounds that we've been shooting this, we've experienced no malfunctions. Now, if you're interested in checking out the G3, I will drop a link in the description to Brownells, where I got it from. I will also drop a link to the Practical Tactical blog, which has a lot more practical content that I think you're going to like. Coming up, we have more videos on the budget self-defense series, including mods on the 856 and on this G3, as well as long-term impressions and straight up head-to-head of the both of them. So if that interests you, I suggest you make sure that you're subscribed. Throw me a like or a comment if you like this kind of content, and don't forget to ring that bell on your way out. That's all I've got for you this time, so until next time, stay safe.